Well, hello. This is Ryan Creasure from Golden Shovel Agency, and I want to thank everybody who's joining our webinar at this point. I'm going to give everyone just a couple more minutes. We still have some more attendees logging in, and we have a very good registration amount, so I want to make sure everybody gets in before we launch the webinar. So let's just give it another 2 minutes, and this would be a good time if you want to refill your coffee and answer that last email and just get ready to settle in for a webinar. So about 2 more minutes. All right. Well, uh, I see the numbers are slowing down, so it looks like our attendees that have been able to join us have joined us. So let me just start off by welcoming everyone to this webinar, Get Ahead of the Curve. This is our third webinar in the series of getting ahead of the curve and helping economic developers look beyond the current crisis that we have now and how we would change our messaging and look at that recovery point. And this specific webinar is how to use website analytics to craft your message during the COVID crisis and beyond. I'll be very honest about it. You should be using your website analytics anyway, but we found that this is a very important time to actually be able to understand what your data is telling you and how you can redirect your content to get some of the results you might be looking for after this. I'm also going to ask everyone to use a poll today. We're going to try to see, get a flavor of where the audience is at, and that will help with a little bit of the direction so this can be a very effective and useful webinar. So let's go ahead and just get started. Golden Shovel has been helping economic developers get ahead of the curve. The one thing that we recognized at the very beginning of this was the communication on the other side of this is going to be as critical as communicating through this. So we've been trying to put together strategies and resources that would help economic developers in their communities as they prepare for what the recovery is going to look like. One thing I just want to share this, and if you'll indulge me for a moment, I always like to establish our credentials, establish why we're competent and leading in this area. So we have over 10 years of experience at Golden Shovel, a very professional team. I'm very proud of the team of designers, writers, and programmers we have that have designed and put together all sorts of resources for communities. At this point, we've helped over 160 communities, and we continue to grow across the United States. And that experience has really given us a leg up because we can hear from communities, we can hear the best practices, and then we share those with people, clients, or those that come to us. And even on webinars like this, we have found that by sharing information, that really is the most effective way to help communities grow. A couple things that we continue to really excel at and are proud of is we've done things like informational video campaigns for Haiti. We've helped out in third world countries as well as in the United States. So we have a very broad spectrum of communication strategies and experience. The other thing is 4 years ago, we started building out Place VR, which is virtual reality for economic development. And at that time, we just thought it was going to be this really great tool that communities could use to tell their story. And now what we're finding with the COVID crisis is this is becoming a very necessary tool. And we have communities that are using virtual reality tours to tell their economic development story. And we're very happy that that innovation and cutting edge technology is going to become mainstream with some of the great ideas that came from our team on that. Give you an example, we took the virtual reality and we're working on a Guatemalan project with Oregon Trail Electric to document the process of bringing electricity to third world nations. So just wanted to tell you about our team because we're very proud of them and we always like to share the great things they're doing. In previous webinars, I've talked about this, and I like to bring this back just to ground us in reality a little bit. And this is really happening. I think a couple weeks ago, we were still in that surreal moment of, is this really the situations of the times, and are we really facing this? We do have to remember this is happening, and it's becoming more and more real for Main Street and businesses and workers every day. We're not saving the past. The more I read, we are in fact building the next generation, and there is an opportunity here. It is getting ahead of the curve. It is, what is this going to look like on the other side? I think one of the most telling prophecies that I see is that economic developers now have the ability and the responsibility to be part of, and in many cases, be the solution for their communities. The job of economic development is going to take on more responsibility and is really going to be front and center as these communities try to pull everything together and restart their local economies. The other thing I want to just say is you're not alone. There's lots of resources and you can do this. There's an incredibly competent base of economic developers throughout the country. We work with them every day, happy to advise them and just give you that little moral support that you can do this and you need to do this. Everyone that's logged on here, I suspect you're logged on because you have a passion, you care for what you're trying to do, and we just want to give you the proper kudos and props that, hey, you can do this. All right, last thing here, and then I'm going to launch a little bit of a poll, but I want to remind people why communicating in a time of crisis is important and it's different. Don't stop communicating. I've said this on other webinars, and I know I'm just as part of this series reviewing that, but don't stop communicating. More than ever, people are looking for information and they need to see the information's flowing and they're looking for solutions. Provide those. Keep your messages simple. Be authentic, honest, and factual. Just get right to it. Let them know and let them decide how best to use the information so they can guide and make their own decisions. Number 4 is very, very important. You have to work harder now so people will remember your message when the crisis is over. So now is the time to really look at how you're going to take that message and then start to measure it against results so you can see what's working, what's not working, and we're going to get into that. And then just a great reminder that I keep reminding myself is 5 weeks ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, people were watching cat videos. Now they're looking for answers and solutions. So they're definitely looking towards leaders, people like yourselves, like us, to help advise and give information. So they need to find a way forward, and the best thing to do that is with good, honest, authentic, honest, and factual information. So just a couple reminders. Okay, before we go, if you'll indulge me, I have a 5-question poll, and these are just very helpful to me. So I'm going to launch this poll, and then I'll share the results, and we'll go forward. So, all right. So I've launched that poll, and now if you could just take a minute or two and answer these questions. There we go. Starting to see that the poll results come in, so thank you for that. All right, I'll give it just 30 more seconds here. I think I've gotten about everybody through. Okay, let's go ahead and just end that poll. Oh, wait, I see just a couple more finishing up. And great, I'm gonna end that. Let's go ahead and share those results and let's talk about what we see. So if we just take a quick look at the first question, have you examined your website statistics in the last 12 months? 71% of you said yes, and 29% said no. Here's an interesting one. Do you understand your website Do you understand your website statistics? 58% said yes, and the rest said no to not really, which is very common. I see lots of people just kind of looking at those numbers, not exactly sure what they might be telling them. Have you heard similar comments from board members or other community members saying, why is the traffic so low, or my web page gets more traffic? Very, very interesting. 45% said yes. That is actually something when we're in a lot of board meetings we do hear. I'm kind of surprised that it's as low as it is because a lot of times we'll see other community members compare their traffic to the economic development traffic, and they try to draw some context to that. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Are you currently using this COVID time to recreate your marketing, messaging, and so forth? 84% of you said yes. So that's very consistent with what we're seeing is people are taking this time to really reevaluate what they're putting out and how they can improve on that. And are you planning to recreate your marketing plan? This is pretty consistent. So just let you know, your neighbors and you're all seeing about the same thing, that you're planning to recreate your marketing plan, messaging, and execute an awareness campaign within 61% in the next 3 months, and 29% 6 months, and then 10% within 12 months. So, okay. All right, that gives a lot of basis. So I think that points to the fact that, yeah, this is something that we're all looking at, we're all trying to do together. So let's just jump right into it. One of the things that I like to, I heard this in college a long time ago, and it's always stuck with me, and that is the rehearsal for the revolution, that the things that we do in times of not urgency are practicing for what's going to come. And now it's really, and when you look at the polling, I think people and communities are looking at this as a time to make a change. So I've always heard this, the rehearsal for the revolution, that we're planning for what's going to happen down the road. And successful marketing is not difficult, but it does require planning, execution, discipline. I liken it to a fitness program of you have to plan for it, then you have to do it, and then you got to make sure you're getting up and actually going to the gym every day or making sure that content is going out. This COVID situation is exposing the lack of preparation and challenges that economic developers face. And we hear this all the time, that all those things we wish we had gotten to, had we been able to get to them, or had our board helped us with the resources and so forth, we could have been more prepared and we could have got there. But it is the situation we're facing, and that can't change. So now is as good a time as any to start. A disconnect with the board or the community. The reason I bring this up is when we first started pulling the statistics, and we've been doing this for a while, but we also presented a white paper, and I'll share that with everyone, of how to use website data analytics to communicate with an economic development board. And this really came out of a conversation many of our clients were having, where they would be talking to board members, and the board members would be looking at the statistics and not really understanding the true context of what that was showing them in how they were reaching their results, or driving towards their goals. So one of the things that's very, very important is being able to deliver the right message to a board to get them in agreement with, hey, this is where we're headed. This is how we have to serve the community, and here's how I need you to help me get there. I don't want to say boards can be very antagonistic. That's not the case, but there is always the board's responsibility of making sure what's happening is the best for the community. And we want to make sure that everybody's heading the same direction, that all the indicators and arrows are pointing at the same goals. So now more than ever, content marketing will be critical, and let's look at how we can use website statistics to get people on board. The last thing, the last little anecdote that I'll share with you is there's a favorite African proverb that I've used a long time in many of my keynote addresses when I talk to people, and you may have heard this. I read it the first time from Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat, but it's the idea that in the morning when the gazelle wakes up in Africa, the gazelle knows he needs to be running because he's going to be hunted. At the same time, when the lion wakes up in the morning, he knows he needs to run to catch the gazelle so he can eat that day. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you're the lion or the gazelle, everyone's running. And I think that this has hit home more than ever with me now, is that everyone is running now. Everybody is trying to figure out how they can get beyond the curve and how their recovery will be the best for their community. So we're all in this, but we're all running. There is no time for really anybody to kind of sit back and say, well, I just hope this passes. Okay. Well, I think I've teed you up correctly, and now I'm going to give you the warning that this is pretty geeky stuff at first, but that's kind of my lineage. I really like to dig into the data, but hang in there. I'll take it through the really heady kind of analytical statistic piece. I'll go through that quick, and then we'll get to how we can use that. But when we start reviewing website statistics, context is everything. And the important thing is to start off with, what are your goals as an economic development organization? What do you want to reach? What do you hope your statistics tell you? Because a lot of people just look at it. A lot of economic developers I worked at, they just pull their statistics and they see a graph and they go, okay, it looks like it's right, but I don't really know. So you have to know what you're pointing to. The second thing you need to establish is, are the results of the website directly correlated to the marketing efforts? In other words, the things that your organization is doing, are they actually driving those results? And I'm going to talk about that a little bit further, but keep that in mind. You need to know whatever you're doing right now is getting you some type of results. You just need to know if they're the right results or the wrong results. If you can establish that your results are directly correlated to the results, then are the results desirable or undesirable? The reason I bring this up, especially now, is people are going to look at their results during this COVID time and they're going to see amazingly high spikes. Oh my gosh, we were driving all kinds of traffic. Well, we have to understand what that traffic did and who it was from and how we're going to be using them in the future. In other words, is the audience you're getting now the right audience? They could be, but we just need to know that, and we need to know why they're coming. The reason this is important, and I'll get into it, is knowing what the spikes mean, high or low, and understanding why that's occurring. Is it happening because of something your organization did? Or in like the time of the COVID, is it happening because of world events and so forth? And then the last thing is, if the results are desirable, we want to do more of what you're doing. If the results are undesirable, we want to change. Okay, so bear with me a little bit. Let's go ahead and get into the deep dive here. How many of you have looked at this and fell asleep? This is a pretty common when you jump into Google Analytics, and that's a good place to start. By the way, if you haven't installed Google Analytics, make sure you have that up and running, because that's the place you're going to go. There's also lots of third-party solutions. We actually dig deeper in with some lead forensics, but we'll start with Google Analytics. So when I pulled this users, we start to see users, sessions, number of sessions, and what does all this say? We need to know what the traffic sources are. This, at first you might just glance at this and see, just what does this mean? Well, let's break it down a little bit. Let's get to some agreement and start with some basic definitions. Sessions and visits. So when you look at your sessions right here, that's the time spent on your site in intervals of 30 minutes. That's important to understand, because think of your own web habits. When you go to a website, you may have that website up and you may leave, you may go get a cup of coffee, you may come back to it. The sessions and visits is that time in intervals of 30 minutes. So the analytics generally look at blocks of 30 minutes. Okay, and then it's average number of pages viewed in a session. So it's not necessarily how many did you view all day long. Maybe you left your web browser up, or maybe you left the tab open for 3 hours, but the analytics is going to count during each session. How many pages are you actually viewing? So isn't a typical user spending a couple minutes on your site? How many pages are they viewing there? And we need to know that, because that really is important as we think about the web browsing. Unique page views. This was the time a page was clicked on during a session. That's important. So again, during the 30 minutes, did I come to one page, start reading an article, and then just stop, go get a cup of coffee, or leave that tab up? But we need to know how many unique page views were viewed during that session. New versus returning. When you go to a website, especially with Google Analytics, there's going to be a cookie. There'll be a tracking mechanism. And so the first time you go to that website, you're new. The next time you come to it, you're returning, unless you clear your cookies. That's very important, because we want to know stickiness. We want to know, are new people coming, finding what they're looking for, and are they coming back? So that's very important to understand, is new versus returning. Segments. We want to know, are people coming through organically, or are they coming through a paid, or are they coming through a referral? How are they finding us? And we use segments a lot to break people into groups, because people that are finding your site through maybe an organic are going to be different than people that are using paid mechanisms, paid advertising, LinkedIn, Facebook. So we want to know how those visitors are being driven to your site. We want to know their behaviors. Landing page. That's the page a visitor entered your site. So what's the front door? How did they get to you? Did they click on an article that you published? Are they coming in through your contact? Are they coming in just through the home page? That's important to know, as well as knowing how they left your site. So what did they come to your page for? What did they come to your website for, excuse me? And then how did they leave? What page did they leave on? So maybe they came in reading a news article, but then through reading that news article, they clicked on your site selection resources, and then they left through that. That's important to know, because once you know which pages are bringing people in and which pages are leaving, you can enhance those pages to make your site that much more effective. Bounce rate. How many visitors left after visiting one page? And bounce rate is very, very important. Obviously, we want a bounce rate of 0, but that's not going to happen. Generally, if you have a bounce rate of 60%, where 60% of the people are coming in, they stumbled onto your website, and then they leave right away, that's going to be acceptable. But you want a lower bounce rate. You want higher stickiness. So watch that and see how people are coming in. Are people coming in and leaving right away? Because that tells you a lot. It tells you that you're not capturing them, that maybe you need to revisit your content or your design. You want to try to make that bounce rate acceptable. Traffic sources. Direct traffic versus search engine. This is always the key. And I tell our clients that you actually want about a 50-50 split. You don't want this higher on one side or the other, because you want people finding you through search engines, but you also want people coming to you directly just by typing your address, because that tells you if they're coming to you with their direct address, they know you exist. So you want about a 50-50 split. Keywords identifies terms to find your site. So this is hard, because a lot of websites hide the keywords, but there are ways to uncover what keywords people may be using, or what phrases they may be using to find your site. People are driven by questions now, especially with voice operated. So think in terms of questions, like if you have a community like here in Minnesota, it might be, what COVID resources are available in Little Falls, Minnesota? That's how they may search Little Falls now. And you want to be part of that question. You want to be part of that answer. And the more that you can answer questions, the better you are for search engine rankings. So think in terms of how people are finding you and what questions they're asking to get to your site. And then of page views. What pages your visitors are reading. That's very, very important, and you're going to want to spend some time with that to know exactly what they're reading. And more importantly, as we'll find out later, what they're not reading. Because a lot of people are posting content thinking people are reading it, but they're actually not reading the pages they want them to read. And how can you change that behavior? All right. The first question is traffic good or bad? So a lot of us have probably seen a statistic or a chart like this, and this has been presented, and they go, okay, this must be good, right? And think of in terms of a stock market, everything is up and to the right. It doesn't look like it's falling off the cliff. Well, we really have no way of knowing if this is good or bad. And this is where we have to apply a little bit of simple math, which is using statistical significance, because we have to answer, is the traffic desirable? I know it's maybe people would say, well, that's splitting hairs, but let's talk about that. Rather, the website traffic should never be considered good or bad. It should be considered this way. Are the results achieving your marketing goals? So if you're in a meeting and someone pulls up a website chart and goes, oh, you know what, my company gets way better results than that. Well, okay, your company also sells online real retail, or has online, so your traffic may be way different. You need to understand those marketing goals, and so understand what goals you're doing as an economic development entity or as a community entity, and ask yourself, what are we trying to do, and how many people are we reaching? And then, are your efforts driving results? If you are putting out a lot of content marketing and you're trying to get search engine, are you actually seeing those results lined up with that? Or in some cases, people may not be doing anything, or maybe they don't have time. Is that driving results? Is it driving results down, or is it flat? Once you determine what your goals are, then we can look at what's causing those results and what is needed to change. It seems a little bit more complicated, but it's really not. Once you understand what's driving results, like which content articles are being read, which search terms are being picked up, then you just do more of that. And I think a lot of people fall in a trap of thinking they have to do all these things. It's really only boiling it down to the one or two or three things that work, and doing those over and over and over. Too many organizations I see try to do too much all at once. And we really just need to get that down to the two or three things that work. Okay. Let's talk about statistical significance. And I apologize, we're now back into a college stat class, but I won't make it too complicated. But I just want to show you this. You have the chart on the left, which is just a chart. Then we have the chart on the right, which is where we pull statistical significance. And statistical significance simply means, are the results driven by the efforts? And if you look at the statistical significance, and this is very easy to do, and we put it in our white paper that I'll send out with this webinar. It's very, very easy to do with Excel. You just download your results or your website traffic for the last year, and then you establish an upper and a lower limit, and you establish your average. If you look at this chart on the right, you can see the average is the baseline, and you can see that this traffic is right along that average, and it moves up and down along the average, and it doesn't pierce the upper and lower limits, which is good, because if you have high spikes where you're way above the upper limit or you're way below the lower limit, and that's not on a consistent basis, what that is actually telling you is something outside of your efforts are driving those results. For example, sometimes I've seen a super high spike in a month, and we go back and we look, and then I'll say, okay, I see your traffic was 500% higher than you normally get as opposed to your average. And then they go, oh yeah, we had a denial of services attack, or we had a hacking incident. Okay, well, we need to be able to account for that so we can find out what should your traffic be, and then how do we move it. And once you establish your baseline, then you can start to look at increments of 10 to 20 to 30% to try to find out exactly what is driving your traffic, so you know how to move things. Because if it's just all over the place and erratic, then you really don't know how to make your traffic good or bad. or excuse me, how to make your traffic achieve your results. So we need to do that. This is what a statistical significance looks like, and I won't be diving too far into these because I don't want you to fall asleep, but you quickly look at here. In this case, you had somebody that was driving along their baseline, and then suddenly they had this huge spike. We want to know what caused that spike because that was probably an outlying event and not something caused by the organization. But in this case here, we looked at, yep, there was a community event. There was a large announcement that happened. And so this was accounted for. This wasn't something that happened out of their control. And then we could compare that to their last couple of years and start to build a plan for how we're going to improve the traffic. So in this case here, we found out the statistical significance was high. In other words, what they were doing was the right efforts to drive their results. Once we knew that, then we could start looking at their data. Now we could start to say, okay, so the users that are coming in and the new users are being driven by what we're doing. Let's talk about what we were doing. In that case, they were doing 1 to 2 content articles a month. They were putting out regular Facebook posts, and they were really trying to attract a higher Facebook following. So once we knew that, we could start to come in and say, okay, so per 30 minutes, your users were looking at about 800, well, they were looking at 8122 page views, and they were looking at 2.3 pages per session. So when a user came in, we knew they were viewing between, on average, 1 to 3 pages. And then we wanted to find out what those pages were. We could look at where those users were coming from, and then we could start to break it down. Were they coming from social media or not? This was a very good number to see that 880 people were coming from social media, because we were able to tie that back to the social media posts that were done by Facebook or on Facebook. And we knew that that was working, and so we could do more of that. When we looked at their traffic sources, you can see they were right about where we wanted them to be. 49% were direct. In other words, a lot of the traffic that was coming in, or 50% of it, was by people that already knew they existed. And then we were picking up new users because of paid searches and so forth. And if you take that over here, that was pretty much correlated to what we found, which was returning you of the users, 2,800 of those were coming back, and we were picking up new users for this time frame that was higher than the existing users, which correlated right to the chart here. So that was a very, very indicator that the efforts we were doing was working, and we needed to do more of that to try to draw new users in, to look at what they were doing and try to attract them to their content. When we looked at their traffic sources, this is where things got interesting, because now we established the efforts we were doing was working. We established where the people were coming from and how they were finding their website. Then we needed to ask, were they the right visitors? And when we looked at this, we found that they were coming from education, government, construction, medical practice, information technology, and railroad. So when we looked at their industries, and then we looked at what they were looking at just general topics. They were coming to the website. They were looking at their sites for site selection, and they were reading their news articles, and they were going to their staff page. But when I asked the question, I said, is this what you're trying to attract? The first question they said, or the first answer they said was, no, we really aren't trying to go after those industries. They were trying to find some other types of industries. So what that told us was, okay, the efforts you're doing now are attracting a certain segment of visitors, but they're not the visitors you want. And so then we started to refocus their content and started to write news stories and put out information and resources to go after different industries. And the industries they wanted were more in the light manufacturing area. And so that content has now been re-engineered, and that's coming to the front. And we're watching the statistics, and we believe that will start to attract the industries they want. But you can see now the goals of what they were doing. They thought they were doing it right, and they were happy that their statistics were going in the right direction. But it wasn't the people they wanted. It wasn't the visitors they were hoping for, which was okay. Now we knew that. And now we could just change directions and help them reach the visitors they wanted to reach. The next thing that we looked at was, okay, what pages are being viewed? Because this really took us down the path of how do we understand what people are looking at? And the most important question is, what aren't they reading and why? So we could look at this and say, okay, very many of the users were looking at just the home page. So if they were coming to the home page, then we had to look at the home page and say, is that pointing them to the type of resources that we want them to view if they're the right visitor? And we started to re-engineer the home page so that it wasn't just this generic piece about the community, that it was actually calling somebody into action, saying, hey, if you're going after light manufacturing, then put right in the front, here's how you get to our light manufacturing resources. Or if you're on the home page and we're trying to attract people to look at our sites and our buildings, okay, then let's get them going in that path right away. So if everybody's hitting this one, let's make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do so that we can drive more people to read the pages we want them to read. And then we found in this case, their press releases were very high. That was bringing people in. Their news stories were very high, and people were looking at their contact page. And that's very important. We always want to make sure that people are going to your contact page because we want them calling you. And so we want to find ways to make it easier for people to get in touch with you, not harder. So this was all very helpful. The one thing that this economic development team looked at was, hey, why aren't we getting more people to our real estate sites? Well, we changed that. And now I'm happy to say if we looked at their numbers, it's actually gotten better. We've moved their real estate sites and links front and center to their home pages. And we've actually put links on their press releases and their news stories. So if you're reading a press release, then you get to 3/4 of the way through that press release, we'll put a link there that says, hey, here's our available buildings. Here's our available sites. It allows people to get to the content that they may find useful. So that's how we did that. And this all, is a very formula-driven process. We looked at the traffic sources. We looked at the content. Now we're looking at what pages they're actually reading and how you can shift that content to your broader audience. And this is key. Because we knew that the confidence of our efforts were high, we knew that whatever we put out was going to drive the results we wanted. In other words, we weren't just randomly getting lucky. Okay, well, thank you. You've held me in there for 39 minutes. Let's just do a quick review. And everybody will get a copy of this, by the way. If I've spoken too fast, I apologize. But everybody will get a copy of this if you want to review it. But let's take a quick review here. First of all, access your website and social media statistics. Make sure that you have the ability to get Google Analytics or whatever. Some people skip that step or they don't know. Make sure whoever's providing your website can get you that traffic. We send it to our clients on a quarterly basis, and we also do monthly reviews. But every quarter, everyone gets a report. Here's everything, and here's how your efforts are going. Establish statistical significance. Don't skip this. Find out what your upper and your lower limits are and what your average traffic is so you know, are you achieving the results you want? Then analyze your traffic sources. Where are they coming from? Are they direct? Are they coming into Facebook? Are they searches? Find out where they're coming from so you know how to drive those sources the right way. Analyze your visitor detail. Know who's coming, right? It's a dinner party. You want to know who your guests are, who's walking in the door. I don't want to have any strangers here, somebody that I can't account for. So know who your visitors are. Analyze the pages they view and that they don't view. While they're there, which pages, which content are they consuming? And if it's the right content, you'll do more of that. If it's not the right content, you'll do less of that. It really is about moving your levers up or down based on how your visitors are interacting with your website. Refresh or create content to improve traffic and attract desired visitors. And sometimes it could be as simple as just changing the title of an article you posted. Don't think you have to rewrite your content. We've often found that we've looked at articles, and when we talk to them, we're like, well, this content was not getting a lot of traction, but your title doesn't seem to tell exactly what the content does. And we change the title, and lo and behold, we would get great reading, we get great results out of it. So sometimes it can be just a matter of rewriting a piece of something you already have out there. Review your statistics monthly and adjust. Um, Look at what you're doing so that you can adjust on a monthly basis to get to that content. Because if you just kind of let this linger and you don't get to it for 6, 7, 8 months, it's hard to adjust and it's hard to really say what's having an effect. And small adjustments. Don't think you have to make big adjustments all the time. It can just be small adjustments. Create content and social media that reach your goals. If you're going after site selection, or if you're trying to attract light manufacturers, or even if you're trying to attract a certain company, then write your content to go after that goal. Why is now the right time? Why is this the right time? Well, let's review this one. And 4 and 5 are the heart of this matter. You have to work harder now so people will remember you when this crisis is over. Right now, everybody's online looking for information. Now is the time to make sure your content is being amplified and doing what it's supposed to do. And people, I've heard this many, many times. You come through a situation and then people start to, now they're like, okay, now I can finally get our message out. And after the crisis, people will literally say, oh, I see you're sending me notices now. Where were you during the crisis? Where were you when I really needed the information? So don't be that person. Get your information out there now, get remembered, and start to help people, and they'll come back to your site. And then again, 5 weeks ago, people were watching cat videos. Now they're looking at your content. Now is the time that you will have eyeballs, and you want to make sure that you're really getting the right content, you're getting the right visitors, you're getting the right dinner guests, so to speak. When we send out this webinar, when we send out this recording, and we'll send out the presentation, we'll include all of our resources that you're welcome to look at, and hopefully you'll find these helpful. And the last slide here is, this is how you can get a hold of us. If you would like to hear more, or you'd just like to get some insights as to how we can help you, or if you just want to ask a question. Now during this time, our representatives are just answering lots of questions and helping people guide their communities. So with that, I feel like I've talked a lot, and I think I have, and I've gone a little bit longer than I normally like to go in my webinars, but I'm going to hold out here for another couple minutes. If people want to ask questions, now is the time you could use your chat or your question and answer. If you don't, that's fine. We'll be sending this information out as well. But more importantly, I want to thank everyone, and I hope you're all doing well. I know this is an interesting time, but thank you for joining our webinar. So I'm just going to hang out here for a couple minutes before we end this. All right, again, just want to thank everyone, and I think we're going to go ahead and end the webinar.